The following podcast is brought to you by GoodPoliticsRadio.com.
And now, from Washington, the Inside Scoop. All the news the government does not want you to hear. Now, here's your host on the Inside Scoop, Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. We're discussing the network of torture, prison, concentration camps, whatever you want to call them, that Mel Sembler and his wife Betty Sembler conducted as part of Straight Inc. Now, they didn't call them camps. They called them drug rehab centers. And they gave $21 million to George Bush, the Republican Party, and therefore Mel Sembler was appointed ambassador. First by George Bush Sr. to Australia for 4 years, and then by George Bush Jr. to Italy for 4 years. And indeed, some people on the blog have questioned whether these places, these drug rehab centers, should be called prison camps or concentration camps. And one of the people, in fact, a person I have on the line right now who helped survive these camps, defends calling them concentration camps on the blog. This is what William writes from Virginia. He would say, this is what William writes, I would say that in and of itself, a typical Straight Inc. warehouse lockdown facility, complete with guarded doors, guards posted at the end of each row of chairs in which the group of clients sat, was definitely a type of concentration camp. We were cut off from all communication from the outside world, fed small portions, allowed little sleep, coerced into talking a certain way, group speak, using only an authorized vocabulary, never allowed outside during daylight hours in the first and second phases, forced to flap our arms like stark raving mad Tanzanian devils, forced to stand in line with our toes touching the heels of the person in front of us, and subjected daily to a slew of other systematically abusive and torturous experiences because we were labeled as druggies and addicts. Now, everyone went voluntarily, mind you. Some kids were court-ordered. William, you wrote this on the blog, right?
That's correct.
That was you. I thought that was you. How would you, and again, I think you expressed it very eloquently right there on the blog, but you understand that there are people who've never heard this story before, who think it sounds pretty darn incredible that this happened in America, and we don't have concentration camps in America. How would you explain to these people who mean well, just have a hard time believing this is true, how would you explain to them how it was allowed to occur?
Well, I would say that it's still happening and that they should tune in because it's still going on.
Where is it still going on?
The one program was mentioned, Safe Incorporated.
Right. I'm going to go back to John Gornfeld and Dr. Trebach. I know they know more about that. Let me just ask you before we go. Yeah, tell me specifically, how did you get out of this?
Well, I actually graduated. It was called 7-stepping. And then it was like 6 months of aftercare, and then that was it. We were not allowed to associate with people in the program anymore, and then we just had to move on with our lives.
Did they tell you couldn't talk about it?
Pretty much, yeah. Anytime we were in the building or anything that went in the building, we couldn't, or went on in the building, we were not able to say anything about that to anybody outside the program.
William, were you ever asked by people in the program to mistreat other teenagers? I mean, I don't mean to get you in any trouble here, but you don't have to give me specifics. But let's not ask. I don't want to ask you specifically. I want to be fair. Were teenagers encouraged to mistreat other teenagers?
Well, I would say that the entire program was mistreatment. So in that respect, yes. I mean, if you were complying with the program, then you were actually mistreating each other. It was like a collective effort there. Some staff members, I would term it as got off on doing worse things to people than others. But you know, I mean, the whole treatment method itself is abusive. It's systematic. It's abuse. And that's the main focus of my life now is trying to get people to understand that it's still happening and it's still Straight Incorporated. It's not called Straight Incorporated, but it's all over documents and things like that.
Well, William, I really want to thank you for your call. I know you tried to call in Thursday. You called at the end. You waited, I think, an hour to talk today. Is there any last thing you want to say to people about this? What can they do to stop this kind of treatment?
Well, I would say write to Congressman Miller, who's sponsoring End Institutionalized Child Abuse Act of 2005.
George Miller of California is trying to shut these things down.
Yes, and the problem that we're seeing with that at this time is John Boehner, who is the chairman of the House Education and Workforce Committee, is on the advisory board of Kids Helping Kids, which is basically Straight Incorporated up there in Cincinnati.
So in other words, this kind of abuse is continuing today with the congressman, the very powerful John Boehner of Ohio, head of the House Workforce and Education Committee, defending this kind of stuff still going on?
Yes, I have an email that I got. It was a copy from a parent who complained about the program, who's actually made statements with us and our complaints that we've sent to the licensing agency in Ohio that licenses Kids Helping Kids, and he says that he names a few other people who are like his constituents who fully support the program.
William,
thank you for your comments and this and that. So,
William, thank you so much for calling in the Inside Scoop and sharing what happened to you. Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. One of the things the government does not want you to know is that it's appointing as ambassador people that should be better off put in prison. Things like rape rooms don't just occur in Saddam Hussein's Iraq or even in Abu Ghraib prison. They occur right here in America. People are tortured. Patty writes on the blogs that someone else tortured at Straight Inc. She writes, I also had no drug problem when I was deceived and left at Straight Inc. For 6.5 consecutive months, I was deprived of sleep, nutrition, sunlight, communication with almost anyone, meaning she could only communicate with staff in the group. She spoke to her parents a grand total of 15 minutes during the 6.5 months. 5 minutes was all the meetings they would allow. She was put in withdrawal every single day, deprived of clean clothes, her own clothes, clean sheets, privacy, even when going to the bathroom or showering, deprived of sleeping alone in a bed. Many teens had scabies left untreated for months. It just goes on and on and on. And I know there are a lot of you out there because the lines have been busy ever since I began this show. And the worst part is, it seems to still be continuing today. There are two main groups, actually three, I guess, that have been mentioned. One is SAFE, one is called Kids Helping Kids, and one is called WASP. They sound innocent. Dr. Trebach, who has spent really 2 decades trying to shut this kind of thing down, it is still continuing today, is that right?
Yes, I just wanted to make a few quick points because I think we would all rather hear from the people who've been there.
Okay.
First point, I don't blame this on the Republicans. It's not a Republican plot because the Democrats, while they're not as bad as the Republicans in this case, have done nothing really to change the situation. Secondly...
Well, there is a bill from George Miller in California, right?
Pardon me?
I know there's a bill from Democrat George Miller in California that would shut it down. Just want to...
I mean, there are, the Democrats are better, but you don't hear the Democratic Party taking a position on this horror.
That's true, and they need to.
And the other thing is that when you listen to the last gentleman, was that William?
That was William from Virginia.
Listen to what William had to say, and as I say, I've heard everything he said. I could back up with documentation. Okay? What he's saying is absolutely true. But
including rape and attempted murder?
The underlying part of it is that the problem here is millions of good American people believe that drugs are so fearsome that you must virtually destroy children in order to save them from drugs. That is the essence of the problem. His pastor, his parents, all his friends, the community wanted him in there. So we've got a big job to do here, which is to convince people that our fears of drugs are vastly overrated. They're here, but we can live with them with their presence. And if kids are suspected of using drugs, or even if they use them, it is not proper to destroy the children because they might be near some drugs. So those are the only points I wanted to
Well, I do have two quick points more for you before you leave. I do want to ask you...
I'm not going. I'm keep listening.
Fair enough. Tell me about the programs that exist today, because for all the horrors of Straight Inc., that most of those stories are 15, 20 years old. Tell me about SAFE or WASP or Kids Helping Kids.
Well, every time I look at, a current program, it sounds to me very much like the previous ones. And I've had people come to conferences I've run. Periodically, through the Treeback Institute, I have run conferences with survivors. And I invite in people who've got kids in, say, SAFE, all right?
Okay.
And they defend it. They stand up and say, look, my kid was saved by SAFE. So what you've got going on today, to my knowledge, and I don't know about all of them, I can't keep up with all of them, is you've got the descendants, you've got copycat situations that are very much like Straight, and that have many of its same features. But I will not claim I've kept up with all of them. I can't do it.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that someone writes on my blog today. She lists herself as anonymous, KHK, she writes. A KHK survivor, she writes. I was in Kids Helping Kids in Hebron, Kentucky in 1989. I was sexually assaulted by an old-comer there. The program never reported it to the police. It was under the tenure of Penny Walker, who is still the executive director of Kids Helping Kids in Milford, Ohio. While I was there, I saw boys' arms broken from violent restraining techniques used by staff and phases of the program. Staff lied to the parents about how the boy's arm got broken by stating he was out of control and punched the wall. John, are you aware of these kinds of things still continuing?
Yeah,
John Kornfeld.
they're just incredibly widespread. It's particularly at WASP. The one thing about these stories that people need to remember is that they encountered the law, and the law pronounced these things illegal. These places were largely shut. The old places, the first wave that produced this Bush crony, was shut down. Today, the new model, the new trend, the new wave is to ship this teen punishment overseas beyond the reach of the law with this Utah-based company called WASP, for example, where the New York Times reported, and this is something that Representative Miller demanded that Attorney General John Ashcroft look into, was the use of things like dog cages, pepper spray, stuff that you'd expect to see at Guantanamo Bay, rather than used on American teenagers. And the State Department basically tells you on their website, look, we're not responsible for anything that might happen to your kid when you sign him over to this company that takes him outside of United States human rights protection.
I have another anonymous listener who writes exactly what you say, John. I hope that Tranquility Bay and WASP, which is spelled
that's in Jamaica,
WWASP, might be looked at. WASP is the umbrella organization that has facilities in the U.S. and Jamaica and Costa Rica, Mexico, American Samoa, and the Czech Republic, have been raided and shut down amid abuse allegations. A lot of people have posted links. There's a lot of information here, folks. Frankly, we've just exposed the tip of the iceberg, and we'll be right back with more of the Inside Scoop right after this. Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. We're discussing a nationwide problem, drug rehab centers that have become the equivalent of torture, prison, or concentration camps. I know that's a very strong term, but I don't know that it's not warranted. In fact, Dr. Arnold Trebach, who spent a couple decades trying to shut down these kinds of things, was telling me before the show today about an experience he had with a former drug czar. Dr. Trebach, tell that story to our listeners.
I will summarize it quickly. About 16 years ago, I was invited to a big conference in Australia, and I was on a panel. It was an international panel, and one of the speakers, and his name is Donald Ian MacDonald, got up and started blasting me, saying, I've been ambushed. I didn't realize Trebach was going to be here. I'm outraged, and, I don't like what he stands for. It was a vicious personal attack. And I then got up and said, you have exposed the cruel heart that beats at the core of American drug policy. And by the way, let me skip ahead for a second, Mark.
Yeah.
What we've heard today, in my mind, is documentation of the madness, the irrationality that is at the core of our approach to dealing with the drug problem. Anyhow, at that night at dinner, the American ambassador, who I had never met, never heard of, stood up and said, I want to welcome Dr. McDonald and Mr. Treback here. I think this has been a wonderful conference, and by the way, I have some knowledge of this because I started a program that's helped thousands of kids. It's called Straight Incorporated. At that point, my wife and I almost levitated out of our chairs, and we started whispering. We were at a table with foreign officials, and one of them asked me, what are you sort of excited about? And I explained that, my gosh, the American ambassador is talking about one of the worst features of American life. And I explained it quietly, whereupon the Dutch drug czar sitting next to me said, oh, yes, I know about the program, Hitlerjugend. This is the impression that it's quite accurate to say that this is, like a foreign element within the free American society.
And I'd like to go to yet another survivor of Straight Inc., and I know the lines have been busy, and that's why I've been getting lots of emails, and you can always write on the blog at radioinsidescoop.com. But we have another survivor, Samantha from Philadelphia. Thank you for hanging on so long. Welcome to the Inside Scoop.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this.
Tell us about your experience, Samantha.
Well, my experience isn't any different than anybody else that was there. Let me try to clarify a few things. Do we blame the Republicans? Well, actually, we blame the entire federal government in the state of Florida for allowing this cancer to grow so quickly and so rapidly. And the fact that this is now in light and that they still allow it to happen is an absolute disgrace. So do we blame the Republicans? At this point in time, yes, because they are there. They are in office and they know what's happening. So it should stop.
And
Second of all, is it a concentration camp? Absolutely, because a concentration camp is where they hold people either of crimes or political dissidents into an area where they are confined and denied any outside contact. In fact, yes, it is a concentration camp, which slaps each and every one of us in the face because Mel Sembler is a man who has been honored by the Florida Holocaust Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida, 3 years in a row.
It is shocking stuff.
It is very shocking.
Let me ask you this. You talked not just about the federal government, but the government of Florida. Tell me, John Gorenfeld, Governor Jeb Bush, what is his involvement with any of this?
Governor Jeb Bush has honored the Semblers, the people who started all this, as humanitarian anti-drug heroes. There's this tremendous insulation from reality. We talked before about this fabulous palace that George W. Bush signed into law as being renamed for this guy. This has never been done for any diplomat in U.S. history who's still alive. Even Ben Franklin never got an honor like this. In Jeb Bush's role, he named a Betty Sembler Day in 2000 to honor her work protecting children from drugs, he said, and referred to her as ambassadorable.
And what Samantha says about there's a Holocaust museum in Florida that Mel Sembler is taking credit for?
Yeah, well, he's a major backer of it. Of course, it's a great way to shield yourself behind the idea that you're a wonderful humanitarian who started a local Holocaust center. Of course, the locals have observed the irony of this, and it gives the ambassador the ability to say, oh, these people are just anti-Semites, which is, of course, ridiculous.
The irony is understated that a man who conducted his own concentration camp should build a Holocaust museum to try to take the attention off of exactly what he did. We still have lots of time. Samantha, I want you to stay on the line. I know you have a lot more to say. You've hung on a long time. We're exposing a network of drug rehab centers that have turned into concentration camps. It happened 15 years ago. It happened 10 years ago. It continues to happen today. And the people that do it are being feted by the Republican Party, by George Bush and his brother Jeb Bush. The ringleader is Mel Sembler. He is actually getting a palace dedicated to him in Rome with $30 million of your taxpayer money. And meanwhile, we hear from survivor after survivor of Mel Sembler's torture techniques. We have someone named Brian who writes on the blog. What many people don't realize is the long-term effects of these kinds of treatment facilities. Understand that our unsung heroes, like Ginger Warbus, Sammy Monroe, Richard Branberry, Wes Fager, and others, these people are only touching on the depth of the torture of these programs. This leads to post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, suicides, domestic violence, crime rate increase, and many other vile and societal harmful things caused today because of the past of Straight Incorporated. He goes on to say that we straight survivors have not had our final and legal vengeance yet because we've yet to find an attorney creative enough to hear us, to get past the cronies and their effects on statute of limitations and suit caps, that many of the survivors are just beginning to wake up and remember what happened to us 10, 15, 25 years ago. You can read the rest of what Brian had to write on radioinsidescoop.com. I have one of those unsung heroes, Samantha from Philadelphia. Samantha, welcome back to the Inside Scoop.
Hi, thank you.
Tell me this, why haven't you, or have you, gotten a lawyer and sued these people and gotten them to pay for what they did?
Well, when I first escaped from Straight, or the final time I escaped from Straight, I actually went to Pernick and Carroll, attorney at laws, and tried to file charges against them. It turned out that Pernick and Carroll happened to have been on the board of directors of Straight Incorporated. So every attorney I tried to turn to when I was younger had connections with assemblers or just didn't want to touch anything that had to do with drug rehabilitation. As I got older, I kind of basically tried to get on with the rest of my life. And when I came out of the haze a couple of years ago and realized the audacity of these people and what had happened to me and the reality of it, they told me it was too late. The funny, or not so much funny, but the irony of it is when Betty and Mel were asked about the abuses that occurred with me, they never denied it. They laughed and said, well, the statute of limitations have run out. They've always laughed about that in my face, to me personally, and to a lot of other people who have asked them this question. You don't deny this.
Let me be clear, as a lawyer, that legislators have the power to extend statutes of limitation, and this would be a perfect example that needs to be extended. And frankly, to the extent that it's still going on today, that's clear.
The fact that it's still going on today, there is Growing Together in Lake Worth, Florida, that is an exact spin-off. People that were in Straight Incorporated trained the people at Growing Together. Same thing with SAFE, Kids Helping Kids in Cincinnati, Worldwide Association of Specialty Schools, CEDU, Teen Health Industry. You know, because I am so obsessed about this crime that was committed against me, I've devoted a large amount of time basically linking everybody up, and it seems that one after the other is connected with the next person in line. It's a domino effect of this very sick and twisted activity.
Samantha, if you could please do me and particularly my listeners a favor, and when this show is done, if you could write on the blog, on the website, a list of the programs that you believe are connected to Straight so that maybe some parent will see it and not send their child to be tortured as you were. Will you do that for me, please?
The best thing that I can do is give you a link to the Straights.com because it is already all written out there. Any parent that is trying to find help for their child, please, please, please look at the Straights.com. Contact the Hornets Board. Ask Ginger Warbus. We know these people. We can give you documentation after documentation, not stories that we've made up, but actual documentation of the crimes that these people have committed and their connections to one another.
And it's called thestraights.com,
Absolutely.
TheStraights.com.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much for your call, Samantha.
Thank you so much. And I want to tell you one more thing.
Yes.
I myself witnessed a child who was strangled almost to the point of dying in this program. He was 14 years old. I watched another young man who was picked up by his arm and flung to the floor by Reverend Miller Newton at that time. I watched a girl who was ripped by her hair by this Miller Newton who ran my specific program. This man is now an Antioch priest. He ripped this girl by her hair out of group and said, I want this girl the F out of my group. There is a man by the name of Dr. Burns down in Sarasota, Florida, who was on the school board who was hired by Straight Incorporated to come in. This man has said he is willing to testify on our behalf. He will tell you the truth of what happened. A man who worked for that program will tell you the truth of what happened. Please don't let this die.
Samantha, I'll tell you what I will do personally. I will talk to the people I know, and they are Democrats, but I know some Republicans as well on the House Judiciary Committee. I used to work there, and I will talk to them about holding hearings into what happened then and what's going now. I don't know that I'll do any good, but I will do my best to try to get congressional hearings here. And I'll tell you this, if they tell me no, I'm going to come back on this radio show and let you know exactly who's obstructing hearings into this. Is that fair, Samantha?
That is so fair, and I will be willing to go and speak anywhere to anybody.
All right.
At any time.
We're going to get to the bottom of this. And I'll tell you this. I understand, John, in fact, that some TV channels are now picking up this story. Is that right?
TV channel. Well, there's not a lot of media attention to it.
Well, one thing you said, excuse me, I was looking at your notes here. Back in 1992, when it was shut down, there was a Tampa station that did a 4-part investigation into this.
There was that one really bizarre story during the 2000 election that came out on Tampa TV also, where this girl, Leah Marchesalt, who was 16, got dragged into this program. Basically, her mother, they were really preying on her mother's fears that they would let her sister out of this program unless she committed both her kids into it. But back in 1992, this is an example that the first Bush knew about, and the Bush family knew about some of the horrors at Straight, which was in the process of being dismantled by lawsuits, yanked licenses. WTVT Channel 13 in Tampa did a 4-part series about Straight and asked the first President Bush whether he was how he felt about the fact that his current ambassador to Australia, was responsible for this. And Bush 41 replied through a spokesman, "I believe that if these allegations are true, this organization should be fully investigated." And yet, flash forward to this year, and you have George W. Bush signing a law dedicating this fabulous palace to Melvin Sembler, the director of this program. It's like something from an Edgar Allan Poe story as far as insulating yourself from human suffering in these fabulous Roman palaces.
Is there any way, and let's try to be fair to these politicians, is there any way that George Bush Sr., Jeb Bush, George W. Bush don't know about these allegations, have never heard these allegations, actually think that Mel Sembler is out there fighting drugs? Is that possible?
It's hard to tell whether they really believe this or whether they just want his money, which would certainly seem to be an important priority for them.
But the allegations they've heard, they've been public enough.
They've been aired, especially around the time that Straight was closed for various criminal activity, 92, 93, all of these clinics. There was so much media attention to this that it was even threatening to come up during the hearings in 1989, in which the first George Bush was trying to push through 2 Straight directors, 2 ambassador jobs. By the way, they both got them, but during the process, these people were so underqualified. The other Straight director only had a high school education, but they had given so much money. They had been supporters of the first George Bush since 1979, so he really owed them. And
one more thing you were telling me, that the State Health Department Inspector General, Lowell Clary.
Right.
Tell me what you were telling me, what he discovered.
Well, what Lowell Clary discovered in 1993, this is right after Clinton gets into office, and Richard Bradbury, the caller earlier, had delivered some documents to him, whistleblower sort of stuff that touched off this investigation. The question was, why wasn't this place shut down years ago? Why did it have its license from 1989 to 93? And the answer that he found was that phone calls from highly placed Republican state senators in Florida pressured these clinics into staying open, pressured the health department into ignoring and sweeping under the rug what they were discovering about teens being beaten up, tied to chairs, stomped on.
Let me repeat this because it's a very powerful allegation. You're saying that state Republican officials in the state of Florida forced these clinics to stay open, actually told the state health department inspector general to shut up, mind his own business, and leave these clinics open?
It's not certain, but the state and health department inspector general said that there was very strong evidence for it, and talked about how the head of Straight had used political pressure to twist arms and to keep these open, and to basically tell these inspectors, no matter what you find here, these places are going to stay open. And one inspector was told, if you do differently, I will fire you on the spot. So this is under a tremendous. Let's look at the time this was happening. This is 1989. This guy's angling to become diplomat to Australia, and so there's this tremendous political pressure not to tarnish Bush's choice to make him diplomat by sweeping this under the rug. Remember, this was also a program, despite being horrifying and closed down. It was named one of the 1,000 Points of Light. I don't know how many of you listeners
by
remember
George
that.
Bush Sr. He
George Bush
Sr.
had that 1,000 Points of Light award, and this was sort of a centerpiece of it. And Princess Diana had come by to endorse it and had her picture.
I don't know.
So
it sounds to me like Theresienstadt, which was the show camp by the Nazis, as far as I'm concerned. Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. We're discussing Straight Ink. A number of people have written on the blog. Larry Nelson writes, I was forced into Straight Ink in 1977 by some people from The Seed, another program that started this whole mess. I remember the staff members hovering over me like fresh meat, and by the grace of God and my two winged feet, I escaped into the wilderness. After not being able to function, I had myself committed to the Life program, paid the bill myself. I left on bad terms, and Helen Peterman and Nancy Reagan had my VA pension taken away. It just goes on and on and on. And then the question is, well, did people know about it? Well, as Wes Fager points out on the blog, Governor Jeb Bush is on the advisory board for Straight, under its current name, Drug Free America Foundation, along with his wife Columbia and his Lieutenant Governor Tony Jendings. DFAF is funded by the U.S. government. Lay writes, before Melvin Sembler was appointed as the ambassador to Italy, a large number of survivors, including parents, made our protests known. 1, to our individual state senators and representatives. 2, to the White House. 3, to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, who appointed Sembler. We presented our case. We made our protest known. We made a big noise, but they appointed Sembler anyway. He made no mention, of course, Sembler didn't, Lay writes, of the fact that the program had been shut down for inhumane treatment, neglect, and child abuse. But we knew. After all, that was Sembler's point. No one cared about what a bunch of lying, druggy cockroaches had to say. We have Amy, who writes, she was in one of the earliest incarnations of these programs called The Seed, started in Florida by Art Barker. Seedlings abusing each other was, in fact, required. It was how you proved you were actually straight. She was 12 when she went into the program. She had never been high, she writes. The staff lied to her parents, saying she'd done drugs, so her parents would admit her into the program, and her parents still say it saved her life. There's a lot more on the blog. There's a lot of information here. There are people on the line. Let's go to Andrea in Cincinnati. Andrea, welcome to the Inside Scoop.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I am the anonymous poster about kids helping kids in Hebron, Kentucky.
Thank you for posting. You know there's going to be something on TV tonight in Cincinnati. Are you part of that?
I don't care to comment on that.
All right, fair enough. You don't have to.
It's going to be on.
Tell me what you saw and what you know.
Well, personally, I was sexually assaulted there by an old comer.
Oh my God.
And I told the program after that person graduated I didn't feel comfortable reporting it until that person was gone out of my sight, because when you're in a program with a Straight Incorporated tactic in place, you don't have any power. And the reason you don't is because the old comers have to be, they're proving that they're getting straight or programmed or whatever you would like to call it, and they have to follow the rules to move ahead. And they have complete power over you. So I didn't feel comfortable reporting it because I didn't feel like I was going to be believed anyway.
And as Lay has written, a number of you tried to stop Melvin Sembler back when he was appointed ambassador to Italy in 2001, and apparently no one listened to you. I was working in Congress at that time. I didn't hear about this. Sounds like it's been swept under the rug pretty well.
Yes. I reported it to senior staff, and then they reported it to probably executive staff, definitely executive staff, because my family counselor there was executive staff. And that was under Penny Walker's tenure. It was never reported to the police. I witnessed many different things in there, violent physical restraints, heads being smashed against walls, onto the floors. We rarely got to go outside. We had a fluorescent tinge on our skins.
Well, you had what?
We had a fluorescent tinge on our skin from the fluorescent lighting because we were inside there constantly.
Because they wouldn't let you out.
Yeah, it was almost like a jaundice look.
And they wouldn't let you talk to your parents?
No, and in fact, on my intake, they call it an intake there, I requested, because I was so upset, I requested to see my minister and was denied that as well. And I thought, well, geez, my minister certainly wouldn't be for drugs. You know, why wouldn't they let me see my minister? That was just really, that struck me at the time as being very odd.
Andrea, thank you for your call. But one of the most interesting is Wes writes that when Sembler, this is the state health inspector, found that the Republicans in Florida had stopped the attempt by the inspector to shut down these torture chambers, the Secretary of State, Donald Sullivan, resigned, ran as a Republican for Senate in Florida, won, and then was on a committee that oversaw Children's and Families, which would investigate Sembler if there was an investigation. You want a conspiracy? It's right there. It's quite strong. And I have to tell you, the comments I'm getting, Amy, who writes that at age 12, they told her they could read her mind, and she believed it. Imagine how terrifying her life was that year. I still have two straight survivors on the phone. I want to get to both of you. Ken from Cincinnati, thank you for calling in the Inside Scoop.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. I appreciate that. I wanted to say to Andrea that my heart goes out to her. I'm really sorry for the pain that she must have endured, and I hope that she's found ways to heal.
You're a survivor too, Ken?
Yes, I am. I'm a survivor, but I wasn't in her program. I was in the straight program in Cincinnati from 82 to 84. I'm actually calling from Michigan, and the reason I'm calling, well, is I also witnessed a lot of atrocities.
What did you see?
Well, of course, I saw the starvation, and I saw people being slammed on the floor. I saw blood. I saw people being humiliated in many different ways. They were deprived of sleep, and they were never told when they were going to get out. And it was, I mean, the list goes on and on. I wanted to also say that there was a bunch of people from Michigan, and the program eventually made its way up to the suburban Detroit area. And in 1993, when Straight closed down, they opened up a place called Pathway Family Center. And then that place spawned off from the Detroit area. There was a facility there, it still is, and now there's one in Indianapolis. It is growing like a cancer, and we have got to stop this.
And I'm going to do my best, Ken. I pledge to you and to everyone listening today that I will do my best to stop this. Ken, thank you for calling in. I'm sorry, I need to get to one more caller. We will do this subject again quickly. Sarah from Sarasota, welcome to the Inside Scoop. Sarah,
hi, Mark.
You're on the line.
Hi, Mark.
We only have about a minute left, but please tell it.
Okay. Sarah, Mark, I just wanted to, I forgot everything I was going to say, but anyway, Kids Helping Kids can be directly linked back to the Straight program through Life, which is run from Helen Peterman, who came directly from Straight. Kids Helping Kids was actually seeded, pardon the pun, by 11 kids from the Life program.
So this stuff is spreading. It's still continuing to this day.
Yes. And it all began between Sarasota and St. Pete.
And Sarah, you're a survivor as well.
I was in the Life program.
You were in the Life program, and also the same beatings, tortures, you saw it all as well.
Hair pulling, slapping, moral degradation. Helen Peterman herself would walk into a room and stand people up and just start slamming them.
Sarah, thank you for calling in. I'm sorry our time is up, but I am not giving up on this story. I will do repeated stories on it until something is done about it. Thank you for calling in the Inside Scoop. Dr. Arnold Trebach, who spent 2 decades trying to stop this kind of abuse, thank you, sir, for your work. John Gorenfeld, the reporter who helped bring this story to my attention, thank you for your work. And whoever's doing a story in Cincinnati TV, let's keep the story going until these places are shut down.